so you think you know what's coming? Think again. Ooh. The inside says, whatever happened to beloved girl series characters Ellie, Magda and Nadine? Adulthood isn't quite what Ellie Allard dreamed it would be when she was 14 years old. Though she's got her beautiful daughter Lotte, she's got a little girl called Charlotte. Oh, her trusty cat Stella, cat lady, and lifelong best friends in Nadine and Magda. Her love life is non-existent and she feels like she's been living on autopilot, just grateful to be able to afford the rent and her perky little flat. I'm sure there's a lot of people that can identify with that. But this year, on her birthday, it seems it's time for all that to change, whether Ellie wants it to or not. As she navigates new, exciting and often choppy waters, she's about to discover that life will never stop surprising you if only you let it. And I'm going to go and I'm going to read this now, and then I will be back after I've read this and I'll let you know what I think compared to the original books, compared to these ones. Okay? So, it's been a few days. I've finally finished Think Again. I have divided my thoughts about this book into kind of three categories. Things that I liked, things that I didn't like, and then general thoughts. But overall, very, very, very quickly, overall, I liked it. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed reading about Ellie, Nadine and Magda, about finding out where they were. It was like picking up it was like checking back in with an old friend, or maybe someone you went to school with, and then suddenly your paths cross again. You start reminiscing about your childhood or your teen years and this, that and the other. It felt very much like that picking this book up. I'm going to start off with things that I liked about it, because it's always good to start on a positive. And also, I think if I started off with the things that I didn't like about it, you might think that overall I didn't like the book, and that's not the case. I actually really like Jacqueline Wilson as an adult writer or a grown-up writer. Adult writing or adult novels feels like something entirely different. So I'm going to use the phrase grown-up books and grown-up narratives in this video. I think she writes grown-up books very well, actually. I was a little bit concerned that it might feel a bit like a children's author trying to write a grown-up, but she demonstrated her absolute versatility, skill and talent as a writer in that I actually didn't remember that it was Jacqueline Wilson at all once I started reading it. Having said that, I did feel that the characters of Nadine, Magda and Ellie were really familiar, and again shows the talent of someone like Jacqueline Wilson, that she can transition her tone to an adult tone of voice for a book, but still make the characters recognisable and easy to remember from earlier books. So I thought that was really nice. It was like, again, it was like meeting up with an old friend. I absolutely loved the fact that Ellie was a successful writer, and I love the fact that she has like a cartoon strip in The Guardian. I did wish that there was a little bit more kind of conversation around Ellie's career and how she'd gone to art school and what she'd done in the middle. I know there was a little bit of conversation around her daughter Lotte and how she didn't maybe get to where she thought she would with her career, because she then had to balance motherhood and a career at the same time. But I just think some of the process would have been really lovely to see. Just a little scene or two where she's reminiscing, you know, maybe her first weeks at art college where she was learning techniques and this, that and the other. I just think that in the original Girls series, Ellie's illustration, Ellie's kind of drawing and artwork was such a big part of her character, and so it would have been nice to have a little bit more of that in there. But I am glad that she was doing what she loved and she managed to become a successful illustrator. And I loved the inclusion of Nicola Sharp in these books. And Nicola Sharp is a famous illustrator in the world, and Ellie connects with her in the Girls series through a illustration competition, and she makes contact with her again in the Think Again book when she's 40, and I just thought that was really lovely. And they're kind of connected, and they have this like professional relationship where Nicola almost mentored Ellie, and when Ellie has a change of career in the book, Nicola's there to kind of support her. So I thought that was really lovely, and I think it hints at that network that you make as a freelancer, as a creator. It's a lovely little nod to that community, really. So I really love that. I absolutely loved the character of Lotte. I thought she was fantastic. I really like the fact that Jacqueline Wilson says, at one point Lotte asks Ellie why she's named Lotte, and she says, were there any significant Charlottes in your life? And Ellie says that she read a book about a girl who did a history project on a Victorian maid, and that's a reference to the book The Lotte Project. And it's funny because The Lotte Project was always my favourite Jacqueline Wilson book, probably because, I'm basic, so probably because the main character was called Charlotte. I think that was probably why I picked it up for the first time I ever read it. But it's historical fiction, and that's another thing. I've been reading historical fiction since I was a little girl. So yeah, I really liked that. And if I was as prolific and successful a writer as Jacqueline Wilson, I would 100% put little Easter eggs in there. And I think, again, it was just a nice nod to like kind of the legacy of Jacqueline Wilson and her writing. I really loved the ending, and this is an official spoiler alert. So I really love the fact that Ellie and Alice ended up together at the end of the book. I think that Ellie, I'll be 100% honest, I don't think that Ellie has given off gay or bi kind of energy at any point in any of the girls' collection. It was always very much boys, boys, boys. But I did say in my review of the 4 girls books, it would be great if one of the characters had been gay. Personally, I think I would have liked it to be Nadine. I just feel like Nadine, that would have fit kind of Nadine's energy, Nadine's story, Nadine's character a little bit more. But I did like that it happened with Ellie as well, because obviously Ellie being the main character, we get to follow this through. But I also kind of liked that there wasn't really any need to put a label on it. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine. I don't necessarily like books that end at the kiss. I like books that end with a little bit more. So after the relationship, it shows how the relationship blossoms and gets together. Having said that, I know that Jacqueline Wilson probably felt that she had to stop this at some point, otherwise she could just write Ellie's story forever. And so I kind of liked the way that it finished with them two kind of getting together. It was like a nice meet cute moment. It reminded me of some very kind of old school romance books and romance films and stuff. So I liked that. Again, it was kind of evoking early noughties romantic nostalgia for me. So I really loved that kind of storyline. Eggs being gay, or Ben as he's known in this, so his character, Ellie's little brother, is known as Eggs because his actual full name is Benedict, so they call him Eggs Benedict as a kid, and then they becomes Eggs just throughout the books, and then obviously as an adult they were going to keep calling him Eggs, although to be fair I would have actually liked a little bit of the kind of Eggs within the family would have been nice, and then him being Ben outside of the home or something like that, like a little reference to that would have been quite nice. But yeah, Ben's character is gay, and I hadn't really thought about his character and where he would be and who he would be with, but when it was revealed that he was with Simon and Simon was his husband, no, I don't think they're married, I think they're boyfriends. They're boyfriends, or are they married? Anyway, either way, I was like, yes, that just seems to fit Eggs' character so well. So yeah, I really liked that, and I liked their kind of story. But going on to, so it's really hard because that kind of ties into something that I didn't like about the book, but I want to be quite segmented. So that's kind of everything that I enjoyed about the book. I think there's quite a lot of things there. I could go on about this for a lot longer, but I'm going to leave the positives there for a moment. I'm going to move on to what I didn't like about the book. So whilst Eggs' character did feel like a gay character, and I thought that his storyline of being gay and his husband Simon was great, it did feel a little bit like there were some gay stereotypes put in there, and it felt, I would have liked, I won't say it was fully tokenistic because I don't think it was. I think that's been a bit harsh. But I think there were moments where I was like, oh, really? So like Eggs and Simon are interior designers. Of course they are, because all gay men want to be interior designers. It was a bit like, it was a bit what people imagined gay men to like 20 years ago. And I kind of wish that hadn't been the case. Yeah, it kind of made me go, oh, that's a shame. I would have liked something else entirely. But that's one simple piece of it. The other thing I didn't quite like was when Ellie told Nigel, her cousin, that she was a lesbian so that she could get out of having like an awkward conversation with him about So his character, he is like a secret admirer. There's a lot going on in this book, and I do think that this particular storyline with Nigel just wasn't needed. I don't know why it was put in there. Maybe because she was going to tell him that she was gay, and then it was going to lead on to people being like, oh, well, maybe she is. I don't know. It was an odd storyline anyway, and I don't feel like it was needed. There was enough going on in the book as it was. But she tells Nigel, she's like, I'm not interested in you. You're my cousin. Like, why would you ever think that we were going to have a relationship? I'm not interested in you in that way at all. You are my cousin. And rather than just reiterating that and being very determined, she has this ditheriness about her, and she shies away from having difficult conversations. And so rather than just having that conversation with him, which I feel like that's the kind of thing that you can have a very definite conversation. You don't need to feel awkward about telling your cousin that they're being inappropriate with you. You know, she says, oh, I'm gay. And I was like, first of all, a millennial would not do that. There's no millennials that would stand around and tell somebody that they're gay if they're not. It's just not appropriate anymore to say something like that. And yeah, that was a moment where I was like, no, I don't really like that. And I don't feel like that is properly representative of Ellie's age group. One of the big things that really saddened me about the book was that there were two really major inconsistencies from the original books to Think Again. And I was really sad about it. So the first one was Nellie the elephant, the stuffed toy that Ellie has as a little girl, suddenly makes a miraculous reappearance in the books. And it's not as if... So in the initial book, in this book, Girls in Love, the very first one, there's a section where Ellie talks about having gotten rid of Nellie the elephant. I'll just read it out very, very quickly. When Egg started crawling, he ignored all his own cuddly toys and always wanted mine. We once had a fight over Nellie. This is Nellie the elephant toy. Eggs was screaming and screaming and wouldn't give her back, but I wouldn't give it up. And when Eggs was suddenly sick all over Nellie, I insisted he'd done it on purpose. I said Nellie was spoilt forever, and I sluiced Nellie down and put her in the washing machine. She ended up a rather naff pale mauve, and her stuffing went lumpy. She was still Nellie, but I insisted she was spoiled, and I threw her in the dustbin. I wish I hadn't. I wished it almost the minute the dustmen carted her off. I know it's totally mad, but I still sometimes think of her now, lying amongst rotting Chinese takeaways and soggy tea bags on some stinking rubbish tip, her trunk crumpled in despair. So that scene is very obvious that she gets rid of Nellie the elephant. And then suddenly Nellie the elephant makes a reappearance in Think Again. So there's a scene where Ellie's talking about the fact that she draws Myrtle Mouse for The Guardian, and she's talking about wanting to look into writing a graphic novel, and she's thinking about things, and she's thinking about different animals, and she says, I need to think up another animal. I used to do countless Nellie the elephant cartoons on my workbooks when I was at school, based on the much-loved blue toy I cuddled in bed right up to my teens. That's a little bit inconsistent, because if Eggs was supposed to be very small when he threw up on Nellie, then she wouldn't have had Nellie the elephant all the way up to her teens. But anyway, I gave my toy Nellie to Lotte when she was a toddler, and she loved her too. Whenever I changed her sheets, I'd come across her hiding under the pillows, and I'd hold her close, stroking her faded velvet, missing Mum all over again. It's an inconsistency. Now, you might be sitting there going, Charlotte, it's a stuffed toy, what's the problem? But it's one of those things that it's like, we loved the Girls series, us writers, the millennials that have begged for this book. And millennials have been begging for an updated Girls book about what the three girls got up to after their life and as they grew up. For me, little inconsistencies like that, I feel like that's quite a big inconsistency, means that there just hasn't been enough either proofreading, or it feels a bit careless that kind of level of inconsistency was allowed to go through. Now, if Jacqueline Wilson was thinking, oh God, I want Ellie to do elephants, I want her to draw elephants as part of this graphic novel that she's going to do as part of the storyline, it actually would have been a really nice moment to have either Anna having given Ellie Nellie the elephant when Lottie was born, and maybe Anna had seen Ellie throw Nellie in the bin all of those years ago and had washed him and kept him and then presented him back to Ellie at the point that she had her own daughter. That would have been a lovely moment. Or even more than that, at this point when Ellie is trying to decide what she wants to do next after the Myrtle Mouse cartoon gets scrapped, at that point Anna could have presented her with the Nellie teddy and been like, you know, I kept this all these years, why don't you resurrect Nellie? That would have been a lovely moment because it would have kept it consistent with the original books, but it would have had this wonderful kind of creative awakening. And I think, as someone who thinks very much about creative inspiration, it's moments like that that really I feel like Ellie would have spent quite a lot of time ruminating on and thinking about in terms of when she is trying to decide what she's doing about the next comic and about the Nellie the Elephant book, sorry. So it feels like a small inconsistency, but I feel it implicates more of a carelessness on the side of the publishers, and that it wasn't made consistent. But yeah, that's one. And then the other big inconsistency is Mr. Windsor's name. So there is a point. So Mr. Windsor is Ellie's art teacher from school. She is obviously taught by him in the girls series, and then as they go older, she meets and reconnects with him, and she ends up having a romantic relationship with him, which in itself is a little bit strange. And they do talk about that. They do talk about the fact that it's strange going from being a teacher to a pupil and this, that and the other. And it's very much part of the storyline, and I liked that side of it. But his name is wrong. So in Think Again, Gary says you have a very popular comic strip in The Guardian. She smiles significantly. Who's Gary? Magda asks. My goodness, have you forgotten all about him? You three thought he was the bee's knees at one time, says Jean. Jean is one of Ellie's old teachers that they're reconnecting with. But our faces remain blank. Your art teacher? Mr. Windsor, we cry together. He's a Gary, says Magda. We knew he was G. Windsor, but we could never figure it out, says Nadine. I rather fancied he had a name like a fantasy hero, Griffin. I felt he was a George, says Magda. Maybe Georgie? I'd wondered if he could possibly be a Gabriel. Not the angel, the Thomas Hardy hero. Mr. Windsor was certainly my hero in those days. So there's a whole conversation about them theorising about what his name was. Now, let's go back to, in fact, it's not Girls in Love. What is it? Sorry, it's Girls Out Late. Let's go back to Girls Out Late, because in that, right towards the end, the girls are on their way home from the cancelled Claudie Coleman concert, and they're stuck at the train station. They don't have any way to get from the train station back to their own houses, and they're dithering about what to do. They haven't got any money left for a taxi or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, this happens. We don't have to telephone our dads. You will never guess who we meet up with on the last train home. Mr. Windsor and his girlfriend sitting snuggled up together. Good Lord, Ellie, Nadine and Magda, says Mr. Windsor. This is Miranda, he says. Miranda looks just as wonderful. Hi, are you Guy's students? She says, giggling. Guy, we giggle too, though Magda's giggle is a little shrill. Guy. And all the way through, Guy and I were going to the concert too. Guy, my girlfriend's Guy, comes and picks me up from the station. Does he say much in class, Guy? Says Miranda. So at the end of this book, we find out that his name is Guy, not Gary. Now that feels like such a big thing to get wrong. Like, again, I don't want to sound petty, but it's a small thing that should really have been picked up before the book was published. And maybe, again, there's a reason for it. Maybe he didn't feel like a Guy. Maybe a Gary was a better name. Personally, I feel like he is more of a Guy than a Gary. Guy feels a little bit more unusual, a little bit more artistic, whereas a Gary, I don't know. I feel like a Gary is a sales manager. Sorry if there's any Garys out there. Maybe it's me clouding my own judgment of what a Gary might look like, but a Guy would feel like a bit more exotic, a bit more different. So yeah, that was a bit of a shame as well. It's like, you know, you wait all this time for this kind of book. You really want it to be fantastic, and you want it to have really considered the old books. I wanted them to feel like a continuation of these books. And it kind of, those inconsistencies, it kind of not broke the fourth wall, because obviously there is no fourth wall, but like it broke that narrative a little bit for me. So I think one of the big things that was a bit of an issue for me is that I felt like it didn't really hit the mark in terms of relevance to a millennial readership. So Ellie is 40. As I mentioned, I'm 36. I feel like I've said my age a lot in this video. And it made me quite aware that it was a book that was not written by a millennial. And I think some of the things were slightly off the mark. I think that we know that Jacqueline Wilson liaised with a lot of teenage girls when she was writing the Girls series. It just made me wonder whether she'd liaised with any millennial women when she was writing Think Again, because I think that would have helped in terms of making it feel more relevant to millennials. There were a few things that I thought, I'm not sure I would do that, or, well, this all feels a little bit how we felt when we were in our early 30s versus where we are now, late 30s, early 40s. Things like there's no kind of mention of meditation or mindfulness or therapy or counselling, and you might be like, oh God, another millennial talking about therapy. But I feel like therapy has been such a thing that has been taboo for previous generations, even for our parents' generation. And we are the first generation of adults that are thinking about our mental health, that are prioritising things like therapy and mindfulness and meditation and practices that are good for our mental, physical, spiritual health. I feel like there's no conversation about that. Ellie hasn't been to any kind of counselling or therapy, and she lost her mother at a really young age. I would have thought that, especially around the time when she had her own daughter, that would have brought up so much emotional turmoil for her. It would have been a really great, just a little thing to put in, something about the fact that, when I had my own daughter, there was a lot of emotions that came up about having lost my mum very young, but I did some therapy through the local council, or, this, that and the other, or I did some online therapy and it really helped me to process my emotions a bit more. I feel like that needed to be in there because it's very representative of me and a lot of people I know my age. Every time I meet up with friends, I can't actually think, I'm trying to think of all of my friends on the top of my head. I can't think of a single friend of mine that has not had some form of counselling, because even if you haven't got any major trauma in your life, it's just really nice to have someone to talk to that's outside of your friendship group, outside of your family, completely objective, will sit and listen. It's nice. And it helps with clearing all of the brain fog. And it would have just been lovely to have seen a little bit of that from Ellie, especially as she is a creative person, she's an artistic person. She would be very in touch with her own emotions, very in touch with her feelings, and she would be quite an emotional person. She's emotional, but she's also a little bit immature. And I feel like at 40, she would have done a lot of self-journeying, a lot of self-growth, and there wasn't really much conversation about that. She still felt in many ways like teenage Ellie. On the flip side of that, I did really feel like there was quite a negative emphasis on being 40. And I don't know about other people that are 36, maybe this is just a me thing, but I have felt more confident, more happy and more myself in my 30s, especially as I've got through my 30s. I feel like the happiest version of myself that I've ever been. I am doing things now that I struggled to do in my 20s and 30s because I didn't have the time, I didn't have the money, I'm doing all of these things. I'm investing that money and time in myself to grow and to be happier as a person. I'm looking forward to turning 40. I'm excited to see what comes from the next decade of my life. Christ, if I was more confident in my 30s and more kind of feeling myself and excited for what the future has got, I can't even imagine how great it's going to be in my 40s. There's a lot of things about, when you're 40-year-old, and when you're 15, when you're 13, like the girls are in here, or when you're early 20s, 40 feels like you're ancient. But actually, when you get to your late 30s, you start to realise the average age for somebody to pass away, obviously barring accidents or illness, is about 80, okay? We're 40, so we're right smack bang in the middle. And I feel like there's a lot of negative chat about midlife crisis, and middle age is very negative, and I don't see it as a negative at all. I would never go back to being a child. I'd never go back to being a teenager. To be honest, my early 20s, my mid 20s weren't great. I see up to the point that I'm at now, up to 40, as learning, as, you know, getting a career, getting money, understanding myself, all this, that and the other. And then I've got almost the same amount of time again, or I hope I do, touch wood. I have got the almost the same amount of time again to be who I am now, to be me, to do whatever the hell I want, and to have a cool life, and to feel more confident and feel happier and feel creative. It's exciting, is the idea of having another 40 years of potential. And that, I think, is what millennials, I hope most millennials feel like that. If you don't feel like that, then let me know, because honestly, you need to be feeling like that, because it's a really, really freeing and exciting feeling to have. That would have been great to have, rather than Ellie being like, oh, I'm 40 and frumpy. No, like, she talks at one point about maybe she should go and get some flowery dresses. It just felt a little bit of an old-fashioned belief around age. And again, I don't feel like a lot of millennials, especially millennial women, would be feeling that way now. I feel like we still all feel young. Like, yeah, I'm 36, but I still feel 26 some days. And I feel like I don't think of myself as an old lady. I don't even think of myself as old. And so it felt a bit irrelevant to me, that kind of chat. I identified so much with Ellie's character in these books as a teenager. I didn't identify really with Ellie in this book, to be honest. I found her a little bit annoying. I just felt like she just wasn't really very good at standing up for herself, which I know not everybody can be like that. I am not very good with conflict and confrontation, and yet I think even I would probably have been a little bit more assertive than Ellie is in this book. And like I say, she's very negative about turning 40. She doesn't really dress in the way that a millennial who's turning 40 does. And so there are just a few little things like that just didn't really make it feel relevant or like it hit the mark in terms of character development. I was a little bit sad about that, because I really hoped that I was going to read 40-year-old Ellie and be like, oh yeah, 40-year-old Ellie is like 40-year-old me, and we've got here and we've done it and we're successful and we're happy and we're living our best life. And maybe that would have come if the story could have gone past Ellie's relationship with Alice and could have gone a little bit further past that. And maybe at that point she's like, oh, maybe I am bisexual or I'm pansexual or what. I'm going to explore what that means. I'm going to talk to people a bit more. It would have been nice really to have Alice, her and Alice getting together in the middle of the book, because then we could have seen a bit more character development. Which leads me on to the last thing that I'll say, is that I do feel like everything was a little bit rushed. I feel like there was a lot going on. I've said that already, but there was a lot going on in this book, and we didn't really get to deep dive into a lot of things. Magda and Nadine's stories, we didn't really get to hear that much. There were references to them, and I know that we don't really get that much in the girls' books, but that's because they're written for teenagers. This is written for adults that are going to sit down and are quite happy to read a long book. I would have liked to have understood a little bit more. Nadine and Magda felt a little bit thin in terms of their characters. Nadine was into kind of a little bit like a BDSM fetish lifestyle, and it was a little bit cliche with that. Didn't really explore it that much, other than Ellie being very much like, Nadine, you need to stop letting these people treat you like this. And they didn't really talk about consent and consensual sexual behaviours and that kind of thing that much. So that was a little bit of a shame. And Magda just seemed to have a complete 180 and was with a guy and pregnant, and I feel like it's a great character arc for her, but I would have liked more time to discuss why and how she got to that particular place. And also, I would have liked to have seen her have the baby. She's pregnant, but the baby doesn't come at any point. She's still pregnant at the end of the book. So I feel like there could have been a really lovely ability for Ellie to support Magda having had her baby and support her as a mother, and that didn't happen, so that's a bit of a shame. This leads me on to my general thoughts, and I really do need to stop soon because I've been talking for 40 minutes and I've got someone coming to my house in 30 minutes to come and get my chimney swept, which sounds like a euphemism. It's not. I'm literally having the chimneys on the wood burning stoves sorted out. it brings me on to my general thoughts, and I've only got 2 general thoughts, so I'll keep it quite snappy. The first one is that I really wish they'd done 4 books to mirror the 4 original books in the series, and it would have been really great to have had another 4. So Women in Love, Women Under Pressure, Women Out Late, and Women in Tears. Maybe that's a little bit on the nose, and maybe they discussed whether to do that or not and then decided not to. I would have loved it personally. I feel like we could have really explored a lot more themes in more depth, and the storylines could have been more fleshed out. There could have been longer storylines. Like I say, obviously you don't know this if you don't read the book, but in the book, Ellie's father has a medical episode, and as a result, Ellie becomes a lot more aware of kind of mortality and parental mortality, and that's what leads Lottie to want to get in touch with her dad. But that doesn't really have a resolution either. Lottie gets in touch with her birth father, who lies about knowing that he had a daughter. Ellie says that she told Lottie's father that she was pregnant when she was at university, and the father didn't want anything to do with the baby. But then when Lottie gets in touch with him in the narrative of Think Again, he says, "Oh, I had no idea that your mum was pregnant." Nothing happens with that either. Again, Girls in Tears, or Women in Tears, the last one, could have looked at Alice being let down by that father figure and coming back to Ellie and then having a conversation about it, about Ellie helping Lottie through that, talking about therapy, about the fact that you don't necessarily need a father figure in your life. I've been through that process. I have a father that I was estranged from for many, many years, and then I tried to get back in touch with him at the end of his life. It didn't work out. It was quite emotional, and he's now died. My experience of that is I would like to see storylines that discuss more about fatherly relationships and about things like that later in life. So there's a lot that I felt could have been put into more books, and it's a little bit of a shame that we didn't get 4 with the 4 themes where things could have been done a little bit in more depth. The other general thought that I have is that, like I said, I would love Jacqueline Wilson to continue writing grown-up books. I think that she's obviously got an incredible talent. She's an incredibly talented writer, and she's shown that she can pivot to grown-up books quite easily. I think that if she does continue to write books, what I would love to see her write is actually books about women who are like maybe in their late 50s, early 60s, because when we were children, we looked up to Jacqueline Wilson's books. We read the books about other children. And then when we became teenagers, we read about teenagers. It would be really great to have the same books that guided us when we were teenagers, to have those books about women that are slightly older than where we are now, to guide us through that next step. One of the things that I really loved about the Queen Charlotte storylines were Violet Bridgerton talking about her reblooming sexuality after the menopause, after her husband's death, later on in life. And I feel like that is such a pivotal thing to talk about that doesn't really get talked about enough, is like sexuality in your 50s and finding love again and going through the menopause and the changes in your body and the physical changes and the emotional changes. It would be great for Jacqueline Wilson to write standalone books or a series about women at that age that we can then as millennials read and be kind of guided and helped through that part of our lives, which is coming up in the near future. So yeah, I mean, Jacqueline Wilson's never going to watch this video, but I'm putting it out into the world. That is what I would hope, is that Jacqueline Wilson would write some books like that, because I think that would be really, really good. Right. I've talked for 45 minutes now, so I'm going to shut up. Again, I am sorry if this video has been really long, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. Oh, one more thing I wanted to talk about, was the concept of writing books at one point in your career and then revisiting those characters in another book later down the line. I think it's genius. I think it's such a good idea, and I think more writers should look to do it. Any young author, young adult writers should definitely consider doing this. And obviously it's not something that, if you're writing young adult novels now, you're not going to be able to do it for kind of 10, 20 years. So it's a bit of a career plan, but I think it's really cool because it gives you the chance to really feel like you're falling into that world more, because obviously we read a book and we put it down, and then in our minds we imagine those characters going off and continuing their story and this, that and the other. So it's lovely to kind of come back to them again at a later stage down that journey, down that line, and to be able to kind of talk to them then about where they are then, or to read about them then. So yeah, I love it as a concept, I love it as an idea, and I hope that more books like this are done. I hope that more people consider it as a way to think about writing, because it's a really, really cool concept, and I'm really glad that she finally listened to all of the millennials who were asking for it and brought it out. I think there's going to be a lot of people that really enjoy it and love diving into Ellie, Nadine and Magda's world again. So yeah, if you are in a book club and you meet regularly, it might be worth asking any members of your book club if they read the Girls series back in the day, and then put Think Again as your book club book so that you can discuss it like I have, because I think there'll be some really interesting discussions to be had around this particular book. And I think, yeah, it'd be interesting to know what other people around this age group, this kind of millennial age group, think of the series and the further book. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Right. Thank you again for watching the video. If you're not already subscribed, please do consider becoming a subscriber. And all the details about my Patreon are down in the description box, so you can become a patron if you'd like. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will be back next week with another video. Okay, take care. Bye.